Hi everybody, I'm Peter Rogers, MD. We're going to be talking here a little bit about estrogen and estrogenic disrupting chemicals. Those are called EDCs. And the key point to know about these things is they have a tendency to make you fat. They also increase your risk of breast cancer. Estrogenic chemicals stimulate proliferation of the breast ductal cells, and they also stimulate proliferation of the uterus endometrial cells. And guess what? In a man, the equivalent of a uterus is a prostate. So they increase the risk of prostate cancer. So these are all tumor promoters, things that promote proliferation of these cells. All right, so the first thing I want to talk about with regard to estrogenic chemicals, this chemistry is going to be real simple. You don't need to have ever had any chemistry before. Is a benzene. So a benzene is a 6-carbon molecule, and there's 3 double bonds. And the unique thing about these double bonds is that they can move around within the molecule. That's called to resonate. The fancy chemical term is that the pi electrons are free to move around through all the carbons. So what does that mean? It means that these are super stable. And they'll stay on a shelf for years. Okay, and so the other point is they're going to put a hydroxy group on there. That's an OH group. And this OH group, so you got stability from the intrinsic benzene molecule, the 6-carbon molecule, and you've got antimicrobial properties from the hydroxyl group. This combination of a hydroxyl group with a benzene molecule is called a phenol. And the reason this is so important, super important actually, is because it's the active part of estrogen. Here's estrogen, the female hormone. All right? So I'm going to erase this now real quick because we don't need to be distracted by that. And now here's estrogen. And the unique thing about estrogen is it also has a benzene ring in this corner. Its structure, it's a steroid hormone. Steroid hormones mean that they're made off what is called a cholesterol skeleton. There's 4 rings here, but this is the money right here. The benzene ring with the hydroxyl group coming off that. That is what binds the estrogen receptor. So the estrogen receptor is sitting on the outside of a cell, and it latches onto this hydroxyl group next to a benzene ring, and that says good to go, all right? And the estrogen receptor had no competition for all the, theoretically millions of years for us to evolve, all right? So the point is, anything in nature that looks like this is going to bind the estrogen receptor. The other hormones have very different structures. And the estrogen receptor, it's promiscuous, if you will. It'll bind all kinds of industrial chemicals that simply have a benzene ring with a hydroxyl group, a phenol property on them. The classic thing you probably all heard of is BPA, bisphenol A. That's what's used to make a lot of hard plastics. And a lot of people put their water in that. Not a good idea. It has an estrogenic effect. It can activate the estrogen receptor. And so the company says, well, BPA has been banned. We now have our plastic is BPA free. Yeah, right. What they'll do is they'll just switch out the center molecule and let's say put a sulfur in here. BPS, yay. Okay, it's still essentially the same thing as BPA. You still have a benzene with a hydroxyl group on there. It's still going to activate the estrogen receptor. So the point is, you're going to store your liquid, your beverage, your water, put it in glass. Okay, glass is relatively inert. That's the best thing to store your liquids in. All right, and now the point I'm going to make is that there's lots of chemicals out there that are estrogenic, all right? So the first one we'll talk about is deodorants. Deodorants are a big deal because people tend to put deodorants in their armpit, of course, and they tend to have a couple estrogens in them. It's routine to have at least 2 estrogens. Very often aluminum is in a deodorant. It helps to minimize your sweating, and they'll also put a preservative in there. These are great preservatives, again, because they got good shelf life and antimicrobial properties. So mold doesn't grow in the deodorant or another cosmetic property. But the only thing is, theoretically, we evolved, out of salt water, supposedly, and our skin's designed to prevent water from coming through. So you can swim in the water and not get waterlogged inside your body. But in chemistry, like dissolves like, and our skin has lots of fat or lipids, so to speak, between the connective tissues, such that when you put a lipid on your skin, and this is a lipid, it's relatively hydrophobic, okay, avoids water. This will be absorbed right through your skin. It's called transdermal absorption, and it's worse if a person shaves first. And the relevance here is, for example, look at the incidence of breast carcinoma since around 1920. It's markedly gone up in the upper outer quadrant. The reason is the lymphatic tissues of the armpit, the axilla, are shared with the breast. So upper outer quadrant breast cancer is now about 55-60% of breast cancer. It used to only be down around 30%, 25%. So now it's much increased. And what's the reason? We thought to be because of all these aluminum in combination with parabenzoic acid-like and similar preservatives that are estrogenic. So I don't even wear deodorant. When humans greet each other, they say, hey, how you doing? Okay, we don't sniff each other's armpits, all right? So it's just conformist peer pressure. You think you need to wear deodorant. You don't need to wear deodorant, okay? If a girl likes you, she likes you. Or if a guy likes a girl, he likes her. It's not because of her armpit smell, all right? All right, so the next thing I want to talk about, though, is what are other places to watch out for estrogenics. There's a lot of estrogenics potentially in your water. I recommend filtering your water, for example, with reverse osmosis. All it takes is a carbon filter to remove estrogenics. A lot of times municipal water does not remove estrogenics from the water supply. And it can be quite high. For number one, a lot of women are on birth control pills. Typical birth control pill is like ethinyl estradiol, EE2. All right, well guess what? That doesn't necessarily get removed with routine water filtration. So you're potentially, if you're drinking unfiltered water, you're drinking another woman's birth control pills that she urinated out, okay? In addition, a lot of these herbicides that are sprayed, let's say on corn, how about atrazine, all right? It's estrogenic. So at least get a carbon filter for your water filtration. If you get reverse osmosis, then you have to be aware sometimes it sort of over-filters the water, if you will, and drops its osmolality down quite low. So water osmolality is a different subject, but just for this lecture, I'll simply say, if you're going to drink reverse osmosis filtered water, at least once check a total dissolved solid, number of particles per square milliliter, and certainly at least I only would drink after I've eaten, okay? So that way I got some particulate material in my stomach. I don't want to get too hypoosmolar. All right, what other things to watch out for? Some of these cows nowadays, I recommend don't drink any milk at all, but if you're going to drink milk, watch out for the fact that a lot of times the pregnant cows have been engineered that they make milk while they're pregnant, so their estrogen is really high. At least when you drink that milk or you have some other meat that's got estrogen in it, your liver clears some of that estrogen out on the first pass effect because the food goes from your gut to your portal vein to your liver, and the liver will partially remove some of that estrogen. However, it's in a lot of detergents for washing clothes, typical clothes detergent, non-oxynol 9 for example. And then to make it worse, let's say somebody's got liquid detergent in a plastic container with BPA, bisphenol A, and not uncommonly it's going to have some what are called phthalate chemicals, which are also estrogenic. You got 3 estrogenics right there to do your laundry. When I recommend do your laundry, don't even use soap. You don't need soap. A lot of people in other countries like Korea, they just boil their laundry, okay? Put it on hot, maybe run the cycle a little longer. Same thing with the dryer. You don't need to use detergent, okay? Because what happens then is you're going to get that estrogenic detergent on your clothes. Not to mention the softeners that people put in their dryer. Those often typically contain estrogenics. When it's on your clothes, it's going to be absorbed transdermally all day long, and there is no liver first pass effect to prevent those estrogenics. Why do estrogenics? You want to avoid them. Number one, they increase cell proliferation in the breast, the uterus, endometrium, and in the prostate. So they increase the risk of cancer in those areas. But in addition, they also, when you get into higher levels of estrogen, they affect what is called the p-power gamma switch, which is sort of like the fat switch, if you will, of your body. You're like in your hypothalamus, arcuate nucleus, hunger center, to push towards being set to gain weight. It almost tricks your body into thinking you're pregnant. When the body's pregnant, the body wants to store weight, so there's more energy available for the baby. All right, so what I'm trying to say is, you don't want these estrogenics. If you're a guy and you're trying to get stronger, you don't want these estrogenics. If you're a woman, to minimize your risk of breast cancer, you don't want these estrogenics. So that's the reason why they're a big deal. They make you fatter and they increase your risk of cancer. And so the ways you avoid them, in addition, another way is to stop eating meat. I'll tell you why. I'm 100% plant-based diet. No meat at all, none whatsoever. No fish, nothing. Your liver gets rid of excess estrogen. It conjugates it to another chemical like glucuronic acid, for example. Then it excretes it into the bile. That's what comes out of your gallbladder, which then goes into your intestinal tract, and you typically poop it out. But here's the problem. There's 2 basic types of gut bacteria. There's what I would call plant bacteria, and there's meat-based bacteria. That's because they're 2 different things. Plant is basically carbohydrate and fiber. Meat is basically fat and protein. So when you're eating meat, you get a different type of microbiome, gut bacteria in your colon. And the type you get with meat are a kind that has an enzyme called glucuronidase, which deconjugates that estrogen that has been excreted by the liver. Therefore, that estrogen subsequently, now deconjugated, gets reabsorbed back into your blood, and it raises the person's estrogen levels. So this is why women who eat a lot of meat, they'll have a lot more estrogen in their body. Their increased risk of breast cancer. In addition, it increases your risk of fibroid tumors of the uterus, and for men, increase BPH, benign prostatic hypertrophy. Kind of a big deal. People think it's no big deal. It is a big deal. You get the fibroid tumors, can cause a lot of discomfort, a lot of unwanted uterine bleeding. In addition, it's dangerous to get a hysterectomy. We'll talk about hysterectomies in a different lecture, but I'll just let you know, women who get hysterectomies before the age of 35 years, they are at increased risk for atherosclerosis, hypertension, and vascular cognitive impairment. Cognition down, increased dementia, increased risk of congestive heart failure. Getting a hysterectomy before 35 years of age is actually physiologically a big deal. Okay, well that's going to wrap it up for our talk about estrogenics for now. That was just an introduction. There's a lot of interesting stuff about estrogen chemistry. It's one of the most interesting topics in all of chemistry, biochemistry. Okay, well I hope that was helpful.